Alright. I think I've got everything I need here. Oh, look, there's everybody popping in. How are we doing? This was it Saturday? Is it still Saturday? I think so. Seems highly probable. I suppose the nature of my job is I do have to remember what day it is from time to time. Let's see. Did see a few things I wanted there. All right. What are we doing tonight? Besides some drawing. Oops, there goes that pencil tip. Alright, I think it's time for a new one. It's always a nice, I guess it's a nice feeling when you use up some lead, right? How often does that happen? I mean, you'd think it would happen all the time, but you know, it shows up all of a sudden out of nowhere that you've used up your pencil lead. There we go. See where we go with this. Just been having some thoughts recently. Yeah, let's see where this goes. This might be more interesting. Alright. Everybody catch Craven this weekend? Word is it's a Oscar-worthy film. That's what I hear, right? Or not? Good evening, people popping in. How are we doing tonight? I don't know. What's some good music out there? Anyone have any good recommendations? I always listen to this one. This is always a good album. I would just fill up some pages here. I have some thoughts and I want to think about them. Yeah, actually, technically got some new materials. Not really new so much, but new to me. And I am thirsty. Good evening. Good evening, everybody popping in. Good evening, everybody popping in. How are we doing? New pencil. Good evening. The red one. Actually, the new pencil is this one. And, actually I got a blue one here too. This one's not though. This one is the brown, so not quite blue, but do. Oh, the red pencil, you mean? It's just a red lead pencil. I missed your other question earlier. Disappeared up above. But basically, it's just a lead holder. And it's got the 2mm, or the 2mm lead in there. So it's just a red uni brand color pencil. I just went with the red one just because it was it matches that color. So no particular reason for the holder itself, and that it matches it. This one's nice because it's got the little F on there for the kind of lead I'm using. So sorry if I missed that question earlier. So sorry if I missed that query. Really, I should break out the new blue pencil. Just allows me to get a little more detail in there over the red, but. Good evening, everybody popping in. Yeah, I think I should have gone with the blue. Get a lot of, I wish I could do something about the angle of the light in here so it wouldn't glare so much. So I need to be bright, but the angle of the light or whatever in here, it's just, what if we got rid of the top one? So there's got a lot less glare that way. Which I figured would happen. Alright, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think if I could brighten it up top, actually it might just be better overall for me. Yeah, because the light I have here has got like these two little side lights that go off, well, on the side. And which is kind of where you want the light to be if you want to avoid glare. And so maybe I need to look into some larger lights, kind of box lights to kind of put off on the sides here. Always fighting the glare. That's I remember working with graphite, but looks like I think I solved it here. Just wish the side lights were a little bit brighter, but it looks like they're okay for the top side viewers anyway. Does get this in the way though. Move that back. Lift up. Go back. There we go. to get more water eventually. Alright, kind of working my way through what I got. Good evening. There it goes. Let's see. What should I do for hair here? Oh, thank you. Sir Lantern, if that is your real name. I am dubious of said fact, but I can be convinced otherwise. We'll have to see some ID. Yeah, if we're probably under 21 then too, if we're dealing with this kind of trouble. Yeah, so I always can tell. The internet, it's easy to tell through the internet what's really going on. Oh, you're in Europe, so it's okay. Well, it depends on the country, right? At least you can safely handle Kinder eggs over there. Those are illegal to bring into the United States, which I've done. I actually brought in a dozen in an egg carton once in my suitcase. I knew they couldn't sell them here. I didn't know you weren't actually supposed to bring them at all. Will no one think of the children? I guess I'll zoom in where I'm working, right? There we go. Probably do that over my head too, huh? The wrong way, this way, gotta go down, right? I appreciate that. Been at it for a while, so hopefully I've had some decent practice over the years, right? Hopefully. These ones, I don't know. This is kind of more of my. This is my kind of Bramble exploratory book. And my little kind of tried food and suke. Maybe it says that a particular marker. So I've got a lot of a lot of different markers around here. So I do really like kind of the overlaying this blue over the red. I don't know why. Yeah, it seems like it works really well for kind of the results it grants. So I've got a lot of different Japanese pens around here. So one of my favorite websites is jetpens.com. Actually, this might be the one you're talking about, right? Japanese Kuretake Pocket Brush Pen, fine, but I think that might be the one you're talking about. I always forget the name of them. I've got a bunch of those. I bought a bunch a while ago, so this one's still in its package, but got some of them around here somewhere. Yeah, I like that marker. I'm no neophyte completely in some areas, maybe, but not in that one. That poor dog, just suffering over there. Just dropped his bone. If you heard that loud clanking sound. Yeah, there's a website called jetpens.com. I'm not sure what, there's probably an equivalent out in Europe. It's a company that sells Japanese kind of drawing products. Well, he's my dog. That's what dog it is. As to the kind, United States we call them mutts. In more kind of British-oriented societies, they call them mongrels. But they tell me he is part black Labrador and part beagle. He's asleep underneath the desk, well, the other desk. Hasn't made his way back under this table yet. No, he just dropped his bone, just fell off his bed onto the floor. He's a good boy. It's actually the second dog I've had this week. Well, he's the first dog. I had a second dog this week for a few hours. I found a guy who was a little flummoxed earlier in the week. I think it was Tuesday. Should go back and double check. But basically, okay, you've got a beagle. And mine, he's all black, but he's very small, so probably around, I think it's 15 kilos, something like that, 12 and a half. It's not that big, but that's where I lose half of these mechanical color pencils just to breakage. But anyway, I was walking him in the morning, to get out for a morning walk and an evening walk, and there's this guy around his car, and there's a puppy, and it's not like a super baby puppy, but it's certainly less than a year old. It's around the same size as my dog, but still very clearly, very puppy. And it's going to be much bigger. It turned out it was a Belgian Malinois, or Malinois, or Malinois, however they say it properly there. And he wasn't sure what to do with her because it was 7 o'clock in the morning, no shelters are open, and he had to go to work. And so I gave him my address and told him to drop the dog off in the back of my yard. And I'd make sure she got to a shelter. So hung out with her for a few hours in the morning, and then took her over to a nearby shelter. I posted her on different Facebook. Come here, Bosch. Come here. Come here, Bosch. Bosch. I know you're stuck under the blanket. Come here, Bosch. He's stuck. He just can't move. You're waiting for him to move the blanket off of you. Is that what we're doing here? Oh, you got stuck in the wires too, huh? There you go. Poor dog. So yeah, I brought her home. We hung out for a few hours. She was not potty trained, so there was some cleanups to deal with while she was there. My dog was a little bit concerned because he's used to being the only dog in the house, and why are we bringing this puppy here? He was starting to warm up to her. I think he would have been good friends with her. He's pretty sociable, but just wasn't used to other dogs being here, and did not approve initially. And and then I put her up on some of the local regional lost dog Facebook groups, and no one claimed her. A girl did stop by after I dropped her off at the shelter, and but she was looking for a German Shepherd, not this kind of dog, so it wasn't her. I did see they posted her up on their website and their Facebook group for the pound, and based on what they said, it seems like they found her a home already. Doesn't surprise me. She's a cute dog, very much a puppy. Sharp claws, sharp teeth. Yeah, well, this dog would have gotten much bigger than my dog, probably at least twice as big. Yeah, it's like a German Shepherd sized dog, like a husky. And coming to hang out, buddy? Okay, so he's moved his spots. He's got 2 beds in this room, one for each table. So I've got a big drafting table, and that's where I'm at now. It's actually up at an angle, so I'm not hunched over my desk. It's actually up so I can kick back and see what's going on. Yeah, well, they look like one, except if you ever seen wolves compared to dogs, wolves are huge. They're big dogs. Even compared to most large breeds, like a German Shepherd, they're much bigger, much heavier. Because basically, dogs, they're basically retarded wolves. They've been stunted in their development, and so they're almost more like puppies, even compared to a wolf dog, an actual wolf. Our dogs are basically like puppies in terms of development of their of that animal. And but yeah, wolves they're big animals. Should see if there's a local shelter. Yeah, I've been doing it for a while. Yeah, someone was saying it looks like a 3D. Those 3D images where you have the blue and the red over each other, offset from each other. I'm like, yeah, but that's not really. What it does is it happens. What it does is where they mix, especially, you get that purple effect, and it's kind of a nice temperature change compared to, say, the graphite over there. And but I guess it kind of has that look of that 3D thing. But I think in this case, what it really does is that temperature change with the warm versus the cool. But does it almost like in just this kind of dual chroma effect. All right, well, have a good night. I'm not sure how long I'll stay on here either. I've been thinking about heading out down around the block. Have a good night. It's gotta be late there anyway. Preclausime nuoto, kur esi Europoje. Good evening, everybody coming in. How are we doing? down even more, huh? Alright, angle that up a little bit. There we go. Make sure I don't miss anybody again. I always hate it when I do that. Happens once in a while. Good evening. Actually, I should try detailing with the red. Clean out the red first. Then come in with the blue. Pull those cheeks in on the face. I'm glad you like it. A little bit late over there. Two a.m. Oof. Yeah, we're just approaching 8 p.m. here, so on the east coast of the United States. All right, let me get that scapula up. which I can erase out of there. Supposedly this is somewhat erasable, the color pencils I'm using here. Let me simplify that back down. Not that erasable apparently, but oh, well, you know, that's the youth these days with their bad schedules. The Utes of today. So as I broke her neck, it's too long. So if I wanted to do this arm, it should be like over here, like that. I bring that shoulder up. That's one of the reasons I'm trying to practice is, you know, trying to draw a lot more people out of my head. You know, you live, you learn, right? So the other shoulder should be like up here. Even if I wanted to like bend it back and out. That's gonna make more sense. But I was really just gonna draw the head originally, so, you know, it's my own fault for not planning ahead at all. So, you know, I like to point out to my students who they are in relationship to their work. And they always get really uncomfortable when I start asking that question. It's like, who are you in relationship to your work? Like, who are you? Like, what's the relationship here? And I was like, they seem like, you know, confused and uncomfortable with that. I'm like, you are God. You know, everything that happens in here is your fault. You know, you put it all there on paper. Like, oh. Certainly a better spot up there. I know. It's like, well, I'm the artist or the illustrator or, you know, something basic like that. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So yeah, that's my answer to that. I forget where I got that from. I feel like that's a Don Siegmiller thing. It was one of my teachers. He used to be really kind of involved in the whole concept art community thing until he had a really bad health collapse thing with his. He had an inner ear bacterial infection that destroyed his equilibrium, and made it hard for him to work. But yeah, I think it was him that said that, if I recall. No, it wasn't him. It was Annie Dillard. So Annie Dillard's had a book, The Writer's Life, or The Writing Life, and she's an author of. Oh, I think someone was just trying to call me. Should be working now, right? But yeah, she wrote this book called The Writing Life, and she talks about it in there where, she's like, there's nobody else like writing your book for you, or your whatever your art thing is. Yeah, it's all about you, basically. Sort of larger point. And she says, like, because she's talking about the process of coming up with her stories or her articles and things that she's written over the years, and the challenges she has doing it. She has a little store. I should go back and read. It's been a long time, but she talked about in the book. It's kind of funny where she's like, she says she was talking to one of her perfectly normal neighbors that doesn't do any art. He makes shoes. She said something people actually need and want done, is shoes. Unlike, writing a book or other art things where nobody asked for it from you specifically, usually, right? Nobody cares if you make it or not. There's always more art being produced out there than anyone can actually deal with in a single lifetime, and more being produced every single day. But she talks to her neighbor, and she tries to explain to him how much time she spends trying to avoid doing her work, doing the writing that she needs to do, and he just looks at her like he's very confused. Because he does perfectly normal, everyday things, and she does not. And kind of communicating that chasm is sometimes a challenge for an artist. I think partially just because once you start to make something, you're committed to it to a certain degree, because you're taking something that wasn't there before, and now there it is, and you have to deal with it. Like putting the arm in the wrong place. And it's probably still not quite in the right place. But whose fault is that? Just fine. Yeah. So, but I've always appreciated kind of that attitude that it's a personal responsibility to a certain degree. That certainly you'll make mistakes and there's accidents, but it's always just you, and can't really avoid that too much. That it's all just you. There's you and your tools and your time. So yeah, it's always something worth keeping in mind, I guess. That there's always that aspect of everything you're making. So there tends to be a lot of kind of avoidance in artists for kind of taking that level of responsibility for their work. That there's often an expectation that other people should find what they're doing interesting or useful for them when no one asked them to making it for them. Generally speaking. And if you want people to appreciate what you're doing, you have to do it in such a way, or put it in front of people in such a way that it shows why it's good for them, not just why it's good for you. I think I saw that. What if I die? Who's gonna take care of my OC if I die? There's like a rough cartoon of a guy lying in bed, thinking. Must be going around on the internets. I've always hated kind of the OC attitude, though. There's this. I think you should think more like IP, like you're coming up with your own intellectual property. If it's just the character, it's not usually very meaningful. Like it doesn't exist in a context. Because the IP is a really powerful potential opportunity in a lot of ways. And if you just kind of do it around like your little character without thinking about a larger context for that character, then it can get lost really easily and just being you just draw on that same little thing over and over again. Whereas if it lives within a story that's meaningful, if it exists in a story, then that has value to other people, right? So if it's just you just draw on random whatever, then it doesn't really go beyond that. But if you put it in a story in a context, then it can really take off. Like saw a little video today about a guy named Jeff Smith. He created a comic book series that actually was coming out when I was kind of getting into comics. And he wrote it's a comic book called Bone. It's about these little kind of cartoony characters. And it was a kind of a character and stories he'd been developing for years and years before he's finally put it out as a comic book starting in the, I think, early 90s. And but it took him a long time for it to really, really take off and find its real audience. And but it was like a little character he invented as a child, like a small child, and then kind of stuck with him for a long time. And then he read like Lord of the Rings and started blending it with that, and came with this crazy epic of these little cartoon characters, these cousins who get lost and wander into this valley, and go on this epic kind of adventure. But it went through and like showed how he had gone through all these different opportunities and people trying to especially corporate types trying to adapt his work for their audience, their potential customers, and he kind of had this willingness to this integrity to kind of keep going with it. But this is the graphic novel here, Bone. It's quite my 3 fingers thick on here, and it's all black and white. There is a color version of it now when he started getting it published, I think by Scholastic, but it has like crazy dream sequences and monsters and all this beautiful cartoony stuff. There's a lot of humor in it. It's also terrifying at the same time. There's a whole back up that camera again. There's a whole little scene where they're being chased in this forest. I love the lightning flash on this page. This has always stuck with me. So they don't see anything in that first one where they're hiding behind the tree, and then the lightning flash, you can see all the monsters back there, and then goes back to where you can't see them again. There's a whole scene with them kind of running through the forest that's full of tension. But, there's a great little shot here where there's the grandma and what's her name again? Rose, I think it was. No, Rose is the grandma. I forget the girl's name right now. But kind of coming through that scene, it's all black back there, and then there's the eyes. If you've never read Bone, it's fantastic. Jeff Smith's Bone. It's a whole epic where they start off in this little valley and then they go to the larger cities, and there's ancient evils and gods and wizards and cults and all that good stuff. I should go back and reread this. It's been a long time since I've read it. Definitely prefer it in black and white. The color, I guess, does look good. I think they got a really good colorist for it. But I forgot about all this stuff at the end. I pulled it out because I was watching that video about the guy. But there's this crazy wizard guy who's communicating with this god of locusts. But it's full of all kinds of great moments of tension and storytelling, visual storytelling that you just don't, there's a lot of good stuff out there, but you don't see anyone like putting that same level of thought and consideration into everything that they're doing. Yeah, he's gone through a lot of phases trying to kind of get it more publicly recognized. But the video I saw today went into like a lot of the risks that he took when he was getting started. And it was interesting. When he was in school, he told his favorite teacher that he wanted to do this comic book or comic strip originally, and his teacher just like, it was his favorite teacher, and his teacher was just disappointed in him. Said, if you want to do that, you should just drop out and go do whatever. It doesn't matter. So he actually walked over and dropped out of college. I wonder what that teacher thought of that afterward. But he ended up, I guess, running a little local animation company, and working, kind of making ads and short animations and things like that. And then kind of kept his little idea going the whole time, thinking about it, working on it. And then when he was about 30 years old, so he's living a responsible life, he's happily married. I don't know if he had any kids or not. I would guess he did. I don't know, but he the Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller comes out, and he kind of had avoided comic books because that was low art, and he wanted to do like the newspaper art strip thing because that was Calvin and Hobbes and Far Side, kind of this much higher kind of cartooning art was going on in the newspapers at the time. Because one of the things that people forget about was first off, the funny strips are really important in newspapers, but people like Bill Watterson, who was the author creator of Calvin and Hobbes, he changed the way newspapers published comic strips in the United States. So before him, everyone kind of just did a standard layout of the strip. It was like an 8-panel, double row strip of images for the Sunday comics. And there's kind of printing reasons for that made it easier for them to work with it. But he forced newspapers to open up their formats. And he kind of elevated the art of the comic strip. But Jeff Smith, he kept running into problems trying to get his strip published, get his vision published in the newspaper. So he kept turning it down because he wanted it to be a certain way and to tell a certain kind of story. And he just didn't see comic books as being like a viable route. Like it wasn't a serious medium that he could maybe have that published in, because it didn't look like anything else out there. And his stuff kind of was between what you would see in a comic strip, like like Calvin and Hobbes or whatever, and but the kind of storytelling that's more epic, and you just didn't see that unless you're looking at like Prince Valiant or something like that in the newspapers. And so, but when The Dark Knight Returns came out, he saw that in the comic books. He realized maybe comic books were the way to go, and he convinced his wife to give him a year to do it, and she had him to make a business plan first. I guess she was more of an office type person, and so more hard-nosed about that aspect. And once he had that, he started work on it, and his wife let him not work for about a year to see what would happen, and they kind of got it off the ground, and within like 5 or 6 issues it became a big hit. People were surprised because it didn't look like the other, keep hitting it's too hard, other comic strips, other comic books at the time. So that was like the 90s boom when it started coming out. And yeah, we went from like a couple thousand in sales, a couple thousand issues sold to comic stores around the United States to it was tens of thousands, and then probably at least 100,000 eventually, up until the collapse of the American comic market that happened later in the 90s. But it kind of gave him a big jump start. and made his book possible. Was in the documentary, the YouTube video, they didn't go into. There was like a 4 or 5 year period he couldn't work on it because his eyesight was losing his eyesight basically, and he had a surgery that I guess eventually fixed it. But I remember when that went on hold, and because it was coming out when I was young, so I remember getting it because I don't have like the original few issues, but I started buying them single issues, and they didn't come out all that often. It was like every couple of months. They weren't really monthly. So you could you'd in the story where they're hiding in the forest from the giant rat creatures, and then the next issue is other characters doing something somewhere else. You're like, well, what happened to them in the forest? And so you had to wait to find out until he got around to telling that part of the story. So he was pretty great at the cliffhanger, right, Bosch? So yeah, it was really interesting. It just came out a couple days ago. He's been doing some Kickstarters. In fact, back here I've got his last Kickstarter. He's done a few of them. Did his Tukey book, which was new material, and then this is his. I should actually read this. I haven't gotten around to reading it, but this is his. This is the last Kickstarter, and basically this is his original strips that he was doing when he was trying to publish in newspapers. So this is when he was, early 80s here, 1983. And these are all the characters that show up eventually, but he's a lot rougher in here than he eventually became. I should read this. I've never gotten around to reading this. Thorn, that's the girl's name, is Thorn. Grandma's name is Rose. But so I should read this. I haven't read. I should probably put this on my list. Things to get into. But yeah, this was his original strips that he was publishing. I forgot there was this extra stuff in here. Some mini old books that he printed way back when. He's running a Kickstarter right now, which collects the first, I think, certain number of pages of the original series, and it's like a really nice kind of hardcover edition. This is his newer material. This is Tukey. It's about prehistoric humans. That's about fire and dealing with it. So they have like different species of humans in here hanging out. But this is a little more contemporary stuff. We did a Kickstarter for these a few years ago too. He's just a nice guy living out there in Ohio doing his thing, and but that's Mr. Jeff Smith there. So he's been been a favorite of mine for a long time. I even wrote him a fan letter, like when I was a teenager, and he wrote back, just a thank you note with a photocopy drawing and his signature on there, saying thanks. Yeah, so he's an interesting guy that he's been around a long time, trying to make things happen for himself. Yeah, he got picked up by Scholastic, which is a major book publisher, and they started selling his books into the Bone books to schools and libraries and kids book fairs and things like that. Because the thing is, like, originally, like in the 80s and early 90s especially, like, you know comic books were not seen as like appropriate learning or reading material for really anybody. So like a lot of the popularity you've seen with like manga over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, like that didn't exist for comic books at all. And and so kind of it being like something that normal people read was just out of the ordinary. Now it's way more common that people have comics and things like that, but yeah, I just thought I'd come on tonight, fill up a page. I had some thoughts on some of the shape language. I was thinking about triangles and the blocks, maybe, triangles for. Because the idea with my little story is like the guide on the story and the father-daughter, like they're from different classes of society, obviously, because they wouldn't be able to afford to go on this little excursion if they were lower class or whatever within the colony or the city that was the colony. But kind of maybe separating out using triangles for the one and large blocks for the other. And that'll still keep them distinguished from the kind of natural forms you get with the alien stuff. So that's a little thought I've been having there for the last week or so. Haven't committed it to paper yet. So yeah, so I was thinking about that, the blocks versus triangular shapes. And then I get to head out of town for about a week starting on Tuesday. So I think Monday morning will be my last stream for a bit in Virginia. Probably won't do traditional media. I might do traditional media, some of that, but I'll probably do some other things while I'm in at my parents'. I don't know if I'm going to be able to maintain my proper sleep pattern because they're out in Utah, so it's like it's the 3-hour difference from here. So, well, we'll see. Just because I'll have my work laptop with me. Yeah, it's it should be. I mean, it should be fine. You know, I'll be getting up early in the morning, at least for the first few days while I'm there. I'll be back here on the 28th, and um, hello, Doritos, if that is your real name. I have doubts. Brazil, huh? Yeah, Christmas. Yeah, it's next week, right? Or I guess week after next, or something like that. Yeah, I got to figure out because I'm gonna be home, and so a lot of my family's there. A lot of my nieces and nephews are all there, and so I gotta actually the person that called was my mom. I was gonna ask her like, what's going on for like what am I buying everybody? Because I don't live there and I don't know what people are into and what to get everybody. With the kids, I like to do group things because there's just a bunch of kids. Like my brother has 4, my sister has 2, and you know, and then I've got another sister there, and all of that, and so, of course, both my parents. I guess my dad's doing a lot better from his cancer thing from last year. That was a year ago. It's hard to believe. It's been a year since that all went down. But of I mean, he's not back where he was, of course, but yeah, it's a lot of people. So my parents, 6 nieces and nephews, and of course my sisters, 2 of my sisters, and my baby brother. My baby brother's easy. I already know I'm going to give him. I got these flag patches in the mail a while back for my own little project because I got it for the languages I speak. And so the Lithuanian and the Russian flag patches I got are, they came in packs of 2. So I'm just going to give him those. Not planning on buying anything expensive because it's already expensive enough to fly out there. Especially if they're adults. So I'm not doing anything like that. Who we got over there? Someone on Twitch. Good evening, Professor. Void Force. Everybody with these inventive names. Yeah, so looking forward to hopefully see a bunch of people when I'm out there. Last time I was out in Utah was, I guess it was spring break last year, or this year, earlier this year. They went out there, of course, with my parents, but I was actually out there to interview at a school. And they paid kind of for me to go out there. It was for a job. It was funny because they demanded that I apply for it because I used to teach there. But I knew I was not qualified for the advertised spot, like at all. They wanted a 3D. Well, I mean, I could probably wing it kind of thing. But they were looking for like a 3D production artist to teach there. And I like 3D, but I am by no means a professional 3D artist. And then it also pays like $10,000 less than I'm getting paid now, and it's more expensive to live there. So, like, I already knew any offer I would get, I would probably turn down. So, but they were willing to pay for me to go out. And I was like, okay, well, if you're willing to pay, but just so you know, this is what I got here. Versus what I'd be getting there, and you all are cool and everything, but you're not that cool. What do we got over there? Well, Twitch is game platform, so people actually use nicknames here. That's true. Maxim Maximov. Я как-то не это верю так же. Ivan Ivanovich. Maxim Maximov. So, but it was fun. I went out there. I did this owl in Nomad Sculpt. I started it as a demo there. I finished it here later on. So I should probably one of the things I'll post as I get into this week. I need to get that figured out, but. I think we're doing a bunch of Nomad Sculpt stuff while I'm out there in Utah. Just kind of crank through that. Everybody has a nickname on the internet, though, right, Maxim? У всех есть своя, не знаю, кличка. Well, there you go, right? You got your own ID, your own internet OC, right? Live by the OC, die by the OC. It's funny, the OC, because like that's also like a short. That's also a nickname for Orange County, California. There was a TV show about it a while back called the OC, but it was like a abbreviation people would use for Orange County, California. It's an area in LA that's kind of like a middle class. At least was. I don't know what it's like now, but it was like this middle class area. So, so I usually do the rough in the red, and then so if we look at like actually this one fell off camera. I'm using a telephoto lens above my desk to zoom in. I'd like to get a fancier one, but I usually do the red in rough, and then the bluer stuff in is kind of the finished line work. But so I've got these red 2mm pencil, and then I've got some 0.5 pencils here in color as well. I've got regular lead pencils around here, but I kind of like the effect with the blue on top of the red. So that's the yeah. Well, there was so what happened was photocopiers could not reproduce the blue, and well, especially a particular kind of blue, especially blue in general, I think. But there was a particular type of color of blue that they could it's called non-photo blue. It's basically it was invisible to photocopiers, and so people would use the blue for their kind of rough drawings, and then they would do the finished graphite pencils on top. That doesn't really matter as much anymore, because you just you scan it in and then you drop it into Photoshop, and you can choose what colors you want to get rid of, or other programs. Usually there's like Photoshop, it's the black and white filter. You can throw it on as like a layer on top, and you just move the blue slider and it gets rid of all the blue in the image. And so they so you can do it. So you can do it with any color you want. You can do it with red. You can do it with pink or blue or purple or other colors now. So you don't just have to use blue. So yeah, it's non-repro blue. So reproducible blue. And yeah, so I use like this thicker red pencil. I can sharpen it up, but I usually just leave it dull to kind of help me keep it loose. And then I can either come in with the actual, I have a red that's a similar 0.5 millimeter sized lead, or I can come in with the blue and fix it up. Anybody else up? It's quiet out there. So Yeah, so they yeah, so what happens is the penciler would do the blue and then do the inking. Well, would do the pencils on top of that historically, and then they would scan in the pencils. Or actually, what happened originally was they would actually draw. They would do the inking over the actual graphite pencils. So they would leave the blue on there. So like say Jim Lee or whatever was drawing it, or Rob Liefeld or Will Sportatio or whoever was drawing it. They would do the blue and then the graphite, and then they would mail it off to the inker. So like Jim Lee famously always works with Scott Williams. I don't know that many inkers' names, but I know Scott Williams' name and Richard Friend and a couple others. But he would mail it off to Scott Williams, and Scott Williams would then ink over the pencil and erase it. And then usually what they do is they would kind of split the pages, so the inker got a certain number of the pages, and then the penciler got to keep them. But they would send the finished inks with the blue line and the new inks on it off to the publisher, and then they would get it ready for publication. It's similar with animation too. So they would do the blue line and then the pencils, because they could do a lot of yeah, so that was kind of the standard practice. These days, because of the digital stuff, you don't necessarily have to do that. Though I do know that, I think, at least from the comments I've seen, like Jim Lee will still send off his original pencils to the inker. And a lot of inkers, they prefer to ink over the pencil rather than printing out blue line. So, like, you can take your drawings like this, put them into Photoshop, get rid of the parts you don't want. So like this case, I might get rid of the red, keep the blue, playing with the sliders, and then I could print it out in with the blue again, with the finished lines I want to keep, and then ink over that on a fresh sheet of paper. And that's usually more standard these days. Or of course, a lot of people work digitally, of course, and they'll work with the blue on digitally. In fact, there's some people I know that I've seen online. I think there's a guy named Clayton Henry. If you look him up on Instagram, Clayton Henry, he will kind of do his penciling on the iPad, and then he prints that out to do the finished inks, which I thought was kind of an interesting process too. Because he wants the original inks, because you can sell those. Yeah, I'm over on YouTube as well at the same address. So if you look at My Art Professor on YouTube, I think it's like My Art Professor 203 or something like that. But I am multi-streaming because why not, right? Definitely need those bots on Kick jumping in from time to time to let me know that I can join their Discord. Yeah, then for coloring back then, what they do is they would do like photocopies of the inks or the pencils or whatever, and then the color guy would go through and just like do colored pencil and write the numbers in for the different areas for the flat colors back in the day, before digital coloring became a thing. Sometimes they would actually print it out on like acetate. So if they want to do watercolor, they print an acetate, and then they'd have like a light version transferred to the sheet that they were painting on or drawing on or coloring on, and the inks would be on the acetate, so the thin clear paper, within clear plastic sheets of paper, and then they could keep that on top of the work they were doing, so they could put the inks back down, see how they look with the color, pull it back, do the coloring, put the acetate back down and kind of do it that way. Well, hello over there. Back over on YouTube, right? Okay, good. I answered the question correctly. Yeah, so yeah, there's all these kind of old school processes that were interesting. That they're not as valid as they used to be. Um, Actually, it was a really great book. I've got a whole pile of books behind me. I think this one's actually still on the shelf behind me. It's not in the other room. Yeah, so they would do that with the transparent. It was like an acetate clear cellulose type paper that they would do that with. So that was if they were like doing watercolor or physical, like with the finished colors that you would see in the printed book would be on that. So acrylics or mixed media or oil or gouache or whatever. If it was just the flat colors, then they would just write the color names, and because there's a limited like 30 or 40 colors they could pick from, so they would just write the number in the area and rough it in with a colored pencil matching it. So they just don't do it all anymore. You just even if you're doing the flat color thing, you just print it, do it digitally. Yeah, it's a book by that'd be interesting to see. I have the anime architecture book. Maybe that's the one you're talking about. I've got that one over here too somewhere. The comic one I was thinking, it's How Comics Work. It's got the worst cover on it, but it's by Dave Gibbons, who was the illustrator for what's that? What was that? Not the one. I think it was the Watchmen. Yeah, it was the Watchmen. So he was the illustrator for that. But this is the book here. I'll back up the camera a little bit. There we go. This is one I went through recently. Dave Gibbons, How Comics Work. It's a terrible cover, but he goes through the whole thing in here, talking about coloring processes and grid structures for pages and the whole thing, talking about how it communicates along. He has other formats in here too, but he was the illustrator for The Watchmen, among other things. But lettering and where's the sound effects? Let's see, lettering, coloring. There we go. So it goes into coloring in here. Quite a bit we got here. Some kind of receipt from when I ordered the book. But it kind of goes into a whole bunch of things. There's color roughs, digital color, rendering, etc. So it's a really great thing on the whole process of developing comic book, perspective and designing superheroes and the whole little kit there. But need to go back to reading some of these books. But we got a few others I'd like to go through. Let's see, where we go. Yeah, I love gouache. Gouache is one of my favorite mediums. I do a lot of landscape painting and gouache outside. My sketchbooks, my Moleskine sketchbooks that have that are all downstairs. But and of course there's all the classic illustrations by I don't know what's his face, the really famous Sid Mead and his gouache paintings, right? Yeah, Anime Architecture. Yeah, I have that book. It's, let's see. I've got all my illustration books upstairs, and that one should be down here. There it is. There you go. This just came out like a year or two ago, right? Yeah, I've had that one for a while. There's a series of books coming out about the Akira movies and things that I'd like to get. There's one that's like keyframe paintings. Another one, if you really like that kind of stuff, is I'm about done for kind of sketching for your night, but it is I think it's the black one. The black one's really good too, but the black and white books from Tekon Kinkreet. These books right here, Tekon, from the movie, the anime. But these ones have like all the production drawings in them. Yeah, there we go. It's upside down. All these production drawings on the inside. Let's see, there's some of the closer up scenes. There we go. It's all these production scenes. It's, all these like nice drawings of architecture and city scenes and street scenes for the movie. These are some of like the color keys, and these are all done traditional media in the back here too. I just keep knocking pencils on the floor. Sorry, Bosch. Trying to upset my dog. So that's the black one. Guess I've got the cover on backers. Tekon Kinkreet. It's a fun movie if you haven't seen it. It's been a while since I've watched it, but I liked it. There's 3 art of books for it. So there's the black, and then there's the white one. And the white one's more of the painted backgrounds. I put all the back covers on these upside down, but they've got all these production illustrations in here that are just really fantastic. For just tons and tons of stuff in here. It's somewhat notable kind of as an anime because it's directed by an American, a white American, but it was done in Japan. This is the third book. Third book's all about character sketches. So it's got storyboards, it's got it's kind of like the concept design for the characters and different locations and things like that in here. Some vehicles, storyboards, and that kind of thing in here. So that one, the cover is not upside down, which is nice. But yeah, it's you know, it takes a lot of work to get into these positions. Let's see, where is this? Let's see, what fell on the floor and where did it land? kept knocking pencils on the floor off of my table, moving those books around. I don't see where they landed. There's one. It was just the one that fell off. But I knocked everybody else off too. Yeah, the movie's it's an interesting movie. It's about these two kids. One's named Black and one name's White. It's kind of like a yin yang thing. There's some kind of criminal thing, and the kids all have superpowers. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I don't remember the whole plot of it. But yeah, but it's notable for this guy, this American white guy, went over and kind of got into the whole anime culture, but also became an anime artist for the cartoons, and led to him directing this movie. And I should watch it. I've got the Blu-ray or something around here for it. I can put it in a PlayStation or something. But there's like mobsters and violence and all kinds of craziness in it. Yeah, they're definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen that. There's three of them. I think there's some other art book that's like more kind of general for the movie, but I don't remember. Yeah, but the thing is, like, a lot of those skills, like the architectural thing or the character thing, those tend to be, at higher levels, more specialized. But you don't always know where you want to end up specializing, when you're getting into art stuff. It's, you usually start off general, and then as you kind of get into it, people will ask you to do more of one thing versus the other. And that kind of helps direct you in your career as you kind of see what people actually like getting from you, and if you can kind of get that crossover between what you like doing and what people ask you to do, and you can get paid for that, that's kind of the ideal place to kind of get to. But if you find that people are asking you to do things you don't necessarily like to do, that often means you need to go back and figure out what you're missing, what you're not good at. Yeah, and I've got my, Sid Mead books around here, and among others that I like quite a bit. Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that, actually, because one of the things I teach and have taught for a long time is perspective drawing, and And I have a little teaching site that's got my course stuff on there. But learning perspective is like a big thing for if you want to draw architecture. You got to understand how perspective works. But my teaching site, I've got a course series. It's not quite done, but basically there's 5 parts to it. 4 of the parts are up. One is basic, how to line things up in perspective, turn things into boxes, and turn those boxes into real objects. And then the second course is on precise one-point perspective, so how you actually measure space in perspective, not just general perspective drawing. And then use it to kind of build out a garden using simple boxes, and then kind of mapping textures onto those surfaces. And then the third one is 2-point perspective, and it's kind of how you basically have you measure a room in your house, and you can reconstruct that room precisely, and kind of give you kind of step-by-step process for doing that. And then you render it a certain way as a concept, so not just as a room. And then the fourth one is an isometric project. And isometric is really easy if you're trying to design, fun buildings and things. Isometric is really easy to work with. And so I have you design a combination of architectural forms, like specific architectural styles and letter forms. And then the fifth one, which is I need to finish. I've got the first project done for it, but I want to do 3 more of them. Actually, while I'm at it, so I'm pretty much done drawing for the night. But actually, put them all into a portfolio recently, so I could show them off. It was what I taught at Ringling. I'm gonna move this out of the way a little bit here. And of course I came up there to teach motion designers and entertainment designers for like theme parks and that, how to draw from their imagination and not just from observation. Both of them, but ultimately, really focusing on the how to invent things and make it look believable. And let's see. Yep, there we go. Let's see if I can get this open without making a big mess up here. I have to put this, let's get the light up, out of the way. Get this magnet out of the way. There we go. This way. So there's like the finished product for the first project. So I kind of map out the perspective for this. I'll start knocking stuff on the floor again. And there's the textures and that there, and then this is all the kind of perspective stuff you go through, kind of learning how to actually measure space in perspective precisely, how to set it up. And then there's the second project, if I can fit that under there. So it's a kitchen that I've redrawn. It was my kitchen in Florida. Yeah, so the project kind of teaches you how to go through all these things, but there's the 2-point perspective, and have you kind of do everything in a specific order to map out the whole room. Learning how to do things precisely in perspective, how to lay out the spaces and everything. Like here's a super basic, just keep throwing stuff on the floor. It's tight over here in this little space, but you can see there's it's all on like A18 by 24 paper, or A2, depending on where you're at in the world. How to actually do ellipses the proper way. these are all kind of demos from that course. But this is where it kind of gets fun. So this scene right here, I can grab that, move it over. As big as this table is, like my working area is smaller because all my pens are off to the side. But here's this little scene. And it's based off of, if I can fit this under there. I've never tried putting this on here. But I drew this kind of street scene right here using isometric perspective. So this is the letter forms combined with architecture. And these are actually from buildings I took photographs of in Japan. And mapped them out and then drew them in perspective to match up with this scene. So this is all the kind of process material around it. And this is the final project. This is the fifth course I need to finish. So I finished this one, but I wanted to do 3 other ones from different types of perspective. But again, it goes into the whole process. So, how do you map out an actual letter form in isometric perspective? Using, the printed out reference on a grid and then mapping it into the perspective for isometric. And then there's, some practice assignments over here for different things. And so that's kind of what's on. Then there's like more in-depth perspective classes as well over there, but that's what that myartprofessor.com is for. Let's see. All my pens fell on the floor. But let's see, where's my little magnet things here? Yeah, so the idea with the final project is you're able to draw, create your scene and then be able to draw it from different points of view from within the scene. There's a process for doing it. Which once you know it, it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. But it does take some practice to kind of get used to. And it's definitely, a challenge. But it was, this is something I was teaching freshmen. So these weren't like, experienced artists or anything. These were, freshmen, brand new students at Ringling when I was down there in Florida. And hello everybody, popping in over on the Instagram side. Yeah, so I need to figure out a way of being able to, I probably should just move my little pens out of the way. That would have been slightly less chaotic. But yeah, they're fun projects, and I kind of reuse them now in the school I'm at now. I've kind of repurposed them, some of them to a certain degree, to work with the concept classes that I'm teaching, concept drawing classes for juniors. And yeah, but that's what that My Art Professor site is for the tutorials that I have that are up there that you can stream off of there. So that's it's a fun. So I've learned a lot doing those projects too. It was so when I was teaching it, learned how to explain those processes to students, and that it's definitely a challenge. And but it seems like the students really liked it. The kind of the complaint I would get actually from some of the other faculty teaching at at the same time was that their students were spending too much time on my projects and not enough on theirs, which kind of took as a compliment. So, but that was way back in the day. Ah, Mr. Page, saw you talking with Doug Chang at Lightbox. If you're in there still. Got my Lightbox tag right up above me here. He's already gone. But that was interesting that he was in there. Briefly as he was. Does everybody know who Neville Page is? Yeah, multiple people doing the same task. Yeah, it was interesting seeing students, what they would do with it, because my stuff I think was relatively simple, because you don't want to have the students have all the answers right away, but yeah. But if those aren't known, Neville Page, he's a old school concept artist, been around a long time. He's works with a lot of J.J. Abrams projects. Like a lot of the newer Star Trek TV shows and that. It's interesting that he poked his head in there. But not that I like the newer Star Trek designs. I don't think they don't feel very Star Trek-y. They're everything's hard angled and lacks that kind of idealism built into the technology in the newer Star Trek, but definitely very influential guy. So that sounds like an interesting project. I used to do. Actually, it's funny. I got contacted about it, but back when Halo was first ported to the PC, back in like 2003, 2004, they included the engine for that they used to build their levels and everything, so you could make your own multiplayer levels. And I did a bunch of that. For a couple of years. I only released 2 finished ones. I had like a third and a fourth one that were kind of in progress, which I lost to a hard drive failure, which was awful. And so there was a whole community with that, though, which was a lot of fun. But I actually got contacted, but I guess there's some people still kind of in that community that are porting the maps to, I guess the Master Chief Collection or something. I forget exactly what he said they were doing, but he was asking about the maps that I had made, because there's one called Abyss that's really, really large. It was my first one, so I don't think it's the best looking one, but I made it like this gigantic, ridiculously huge level with it. I wish I could remember what the software was called back then, but yeah, it was intense, because I didn't know anything about 3D modeling and texturing, and so I was kind of using that as an opportunity to learn all of that, and if you wanted to to do all the proper UVs, you kind of had to do it sort of by yourself, and then there was like a relaxing software you had to use to do that, and then I would hand paint all my textures, and it was really an interesting process. But I had one that was called the Abyss, and one was called Narrows, and it was like a slot canyon, which came out before the Narrows in Halo 2 or Halo 3, the one with the bridge that they did. Mine was very different than theirs, but they had the same name. I was like, hey, wait a second, that was my name. I picked it first. But that was a long time ago. Long time ago. Yeah, but yeah, it was. I mean, I haven't done that in a long time, but it was a lot of fun back then. But it was interesting, that it's been 20 years since I did those back in 2004. I just graduated, and I was. They didn't really have like those kinds of 3D classes when I was a student, at least in the art major. I think you could get them over in like an engineering department or something. Um, but. But yeah, they didn't really have it over in the art department, so none of my teachers knew anything about it. I knew enough to I'd do some slight kit bashing for illustrations a little bit, but nothing too crazy. I learned enough like ZBrush by the time I graduated to do some stuff with my final project as a student, and then didn't use it for a long time because it was really hard to use back then. It's a lot easier now than it used to be, but. But yeah, I picked up that kind of the summer I was graduating, and jumped into that for about like a year and a half, 2 years. And it was a lot of fun kind of figuring out the flow of the maps, and thinking about how they would operate relative to players and all that. And I was going to jump into the Unreal Engine back then. Because that was when the Unreal, what was it called? Unreal Tournament was popular when I was a student, and then Unreal Tournament 2 came out, and that actually flopped. But I was excited because that was going to come with the Unreal Engine, the first version of it, and I was going to learn to use it to build maps for it. Because I was going to shift away from the Halo thing to that Unreal Tournament 2, but then nobody played it. The people got into using the engine for other games and things like that, but no one played Unreal Tournament 2. I think I've got the box for it around here somewhere. Okay, yeah, so you probably remember when Unreal Tournament came out then. Um, But and then I got busy kind of doing more of the concept art 2D thing, which is what I was focusing on as a student. Even though, of course, none of my teachers do anything about that. And then I got into painting and some other things, so I kind of backed off of that for a long time. But Yeah, so, you know. Okay. Yeah, I know, like in with the Halo engine that I used back then, you could create assets and populate a map with those. You had to make a map first, you know, the geometry that didn't change, and then you could, you know, put in models on top of that. But you had to, like, be really careful with the, you know, the memory of everything, right? Because, you know, really limited. Um, really limited memory on the computers, right, back then, and the engines couldn't handle as much. And you know, the engine itself, it came with like all of the assets from the game and everything, and there's all the textures and game assets and all of that, so you could populate maps with things. But you could make your own original maps. You know, you could get your own geometry together and build your own maps, which is what I did. And then you had to, like, you know, it would help you kind of locate errors in the maps and things like that. But yeah, some people are thinking that maybe Half-Life 3 is finally coming out. You know, there's some indications, I guess, from the 20th year review, and they said that, I guess they said the big reason why they never released the third episode was they couldn't. They said they couldn't come up with like a sufficiently interesting kind of gameplay mechanic that was new to include in the game, which I thought was weird. You know, it seems like, you know, people would have just been perfectly happy with what they already had and a story. I don't think anyone would have complained if there wasn't some like new groundbreaking technology in there. Newish, I guess, to kick. Yeah, well, you know, but I think it's based off kind of. There's a 20-year documentary, I guess, that just came out about Half-Life 2, and they were talking about it in the episodes. You know, about the episodes, why they stopped. It sounds like just an excuse to me. I don't think. I have my doubts. A lot of times when people kind of give the reasons why something did or didn't happen, a lot of times it's not true, to put it lightly, and um, it doesn't necessarily upset me, but, you know, it would be nice to kind of get the actual reason for it, because, you know, they could have done something with, you know, the Portal series, because they kind of implied the Portal game exists in the same world as the Half-Life world, and they did two of those. Seems like they could have done something with the portal gun and Half-Life. Those games are pretty intense when they came out. And Half-Life 2 is still a blast to play. I mean, I haven't played it in a long time, but I remember it being really great. Yeah, but relatively new to kick, I guess. I found out I can. Big thing was the multi-stream chat, and I found this free program that lets you kind of pack a lot of different chats into it. So I got that set up on my computer, and it kind of does it, I guess, through a browser. So it kind of combines them together that way. I'm not even sure how many followers I have over on the Kick side. Yeah, so I've got 4 different things up. Yeah, so I figure it doesn't hurt to be multiple places all at the same time. That's right. Yeah, it's been a long time since I played any of those games, but I remember the first Portal game was one of those few times I got really engrossed into a game where, like, I was like playing it, and the time just disappeared when I was playing it, and so that was a really enjoyable experience. Yeah, I mean, I like Portal 2 as well, but I mean, Portal 1 was just kind of those games where it kind of rocks your socks, right? You're like, oh, this is definitely something different, and um, I should go back and play. It's been a long time. I really liked all those games back in the early 2000s, early mid 2000s, when I was coming out of school. Yeah, so yeah, those were good times back in the day. Um, yeah, that whole level in Half Life where you're running around with the gravity gun and you're throwing saw blades around at zombies, and the whole boat level, that was a lot of fun. So I remember that one pretty intensely. Oh yeah, I'll have to look that up. I know people redid the Half-Life original Half-Life 1 game. It's on Steam. I think I have it. I think I bought it a long time ago. I remember when they first started that project, developing it, like years and years ago. They started developing around the same time Half-Life 2 came out, I think. Kind of a graphical update to Half-Life 1. Um, yeah, I remember. Yeah, it was in development for a long time. I even forgot about it. Then they finally released it. I was like, oh, I remember that. They were doing that thing. Um, Seems like people liked it. I've never touched it, but yeah, I think I did buy it, but I haven't opened it up. Yeah, but that was a cool project way back when. Yeah, there was the Half Life Alex game, right, that came out for VR, which I have not played. So I'm sad that it came out. I mean, I understand why, it's VR, but I don't have a VR kit around here, and I don't want it just to do one thing. Maybe I could check one out from the university I teach at, so that's always sure maybe they've got a headset lying around that I could use that I could check out or something. Yeah, I teach at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. Middle of my second year here. I've taught at other schools before, but I moved up here about a year and a half ago. I was previously at Ringling. Yeah, totally legit. But it is actually kind of an interesting position because it's a very rare kind. So the school is, first of all, it's a research university, which I didn't realize there were so few of them. So there's about 5,000 research universities in the 5,000 universities in the United States. I didn't realize there was that many of them. But of that, only about 150 are research primary schools. So apparently there's this classification of research schools. There's more like R2, which is like a lower, they do lower amounts of research, but this is an R1 school, so it means like research is an important part of what they do, like almost very, very important, like a vital part. And there's a medical school, and they have a campus out in Qatar, or Qatar, depending on how you say it, in the Middle East. And then but yeah, the job I have here is actually a research position, which is very rare, especially in commercial art major like I'm in. Like they don't exist at all anywhere, and so so it means I teach less than I would at a regular university. Like I've taught it before. Like I've taught at SCAD and Ringling and some other art schools mostly, and those are usually teaching jobs primarily, so your main job is teaching. At SCAD you teach a lot, like 4 classes per quarter, 3 quarters of the year. It's a crazy schedule. I did that at their Hong Kong campus for 4 years. And then and then like Ringling was teaching, so it's 3 normal teaching schedule, 3 classes per semester, and kind of the usual. And so, but yeah, so it's a concept art professorship research position at this school, which is it's an interesting time too because of all the AI nonsense that's going on, and apparently some of the professors are quite shocked at my attitude about it, that I think it's a really bad idea to get into using it, and I'm just surprised how supportive some of them are, because I look at the facts on the ground about it, and I have very, I think, well-founded concerns about not only where the training data came from, but what some of what it contains is very significantly harmful to people, and But I think the larger issue is it's harmful to people's creativity. Uh, there's a psychological effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and basically there's like a tier of it's basically about a tier of perception and a levels of competence, and they did a test of how people assess their own competence. And what they did is they asked people in the United States, and I think it was Japan was the other country, about how they feel about their own ability to do math. Yeah, it's a good thing to have the skeptic in the basement, right? Well, usually you want to have the skeptics out front, right? Um, but basically they asked Americans and Japanese what they thought about their competence of doing mathematics, and then they compared their answers to what the tests actually show. So like standardized testing shows, and what they found, of course, which I don't know that they need to do the research. I could tell them, but I guess it's good that they did the actual research. Was that Americans overestimated their ability to do math. So most people felt that they were really great at doing math, and the testing showed otherwise. The Japanese felt the opposite way, where they felt they were not that great at it, but their testing showed that they were far better than, say, the Americans that they were being compared with in this test. And so the Dunning-Kruger effect is basically they came up with this tiers of competence. So the bottom tier is unconscious incompetence, where it's basically you don't know you're terrible at something. And then it's conscious incompetence, where you recognize your own weakness at doing something, that you have a lot of room to grow in that area, that you recognize that. And being able to recognize that's the first step to actually getting at it, of course. And I've gone through that in my own skills even recently, recognizing where I was less competent at something. And then then as you get into the competence area, so conscious competence is basically where you're good at something, but you really have to focus on being good at it. So like a musician has to really pay attention to their finger placement if they're playing an instrument or something, right? Or an artist really has to pay attention to the anatomy and the structure, and really kind of plan everything out really carefully, without to avoid making significant errors. So they're very aware of kind of their process and kind of how they follow through on things. And then there's unconscious competence, which is where you become really so good at something that you don't have to really think about it that hard. And you just kind of you become excellent at it. And and so I think one of the things that AI will do to people it convinces them that they're accomplishing things that they're not actually doing. So every discussion I've had with friends and colleagues that kind of support it, they'll tell me, usually both of these things, they'll tell me that it's more efficient than they are at doing something. So like rendering an image or coming up with a drawing or some kind of visual representation. And they'll tell me it's also more creative than they are, that it will give them ideas that they would not come up with on their own. And that's what they always kind of tell me, those two things. And I think that's one, it's kind of telling on themselves, right? That they don't have interest in their own creativity, that they don't feel confident about their own thoughts. And I think it's also just a misunderstanding of what design and creativity are. So, for example, I point out that design is not, coming up with ideas for design is not an efficiency process. That's never how it works. It's all about coming up with effective design. And you can't do that with AI because you can't really design with it. You can have it prompt out images, and maybe they're inspirational or whatever in some way, because it does something that you didn't expect. And if you maybe take advantage of that, but you could say that about anything. You go outside and look at the pattern on the bark of a tree, right, or the shapes in a cloud, or the relationships you have with the people in your life, or something you've learned about, I don't know, engineering or product design or something. Like any of those things can give you inspiration. And then as far as like rendering things efficiently or whatever, that's it's like, how many ideas do you need? Because you can literally produce an unlimited number of images using those tools or that software. But, like, you don't need that many. You just need a few. So coming up with unlimited options is just kind of silly. It's like overdoing it. And that goes beyond all the other kind of moral and other concerns people have. But yeah, because like coming up with infinite solutions is the same as coming up with no solutions, right? So like if you throw up like 100 ideas for like a lightsaber handle in front of an art director or a client, like that's meaningless to them. You give you give them 3 that are really interesting and thought out. That's when they can make a choice, and that's what they need you for. But yeah, so it's a weird problem because trying to explain that to people I found is very strange. One of the things I've also noticed is that the people that tend to support it tend to be more on what I would call the production side of art. So these are like your animators, your 3D modelers, people that actually have to sit down and produce the artwork that gets into the final product. Whether it's the movie or the game or whatever. Those people tend to support it more than the people that come up with ideas, because they seem to think that the images it produces are ideas, and they're not. They're a random assortment of things that show up. And then we're also seeing, like, just in terms of the technology itself, we're kind of reaching the limits of what the large language models can do, because they're actually running out of new data, and they need the new data in order to fuel their systems. And so basically it can't train on itself, so you can't give an AI machine other AI images, otherwise it starts to like collapse. It doesn't work properly, and it starts to kind of degrade the results. Kind of like photocopying something too many times, and so they're kind of quickly running out of new data. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of like the social media groups like Instagram or Twitter, they just decided they're just taking all of our data. They opted everybody in without asking them if they could, without an option to shut it off. I think unless you're in Europe or something like that, then you can turn it off. But in the United States, there's no protections for it. And so they're running out of data. So it's like it's almost as if we burned up the last oil reserve on the planet. There's no natural gas, no more oil, no more coal, and suddenly what are we going to do, right? It's like we don't have solar power is not reliable enough. We don't have battery storage. Wind's not reliable. What do we do all of a sudden? And that's kind of what they're running into with the data issue, because they've already absorbed almost everything on the internet into the systems. And then of course there's power usage issues, like Microsoft and Meta or Facebook. They want to get exclusive access to nuclear power plants to provide sufficient power for their AI systems. And so there just isn't enough power available either for all the systems, and it's driven up the cost of chips and So if I wanted to get like a new graphics card for my computer, I'd spend like $2,000 or $3,000 to get a good one, and it shouldn't, it shouldn't cost that much. Yeah, and then there's the deceptive aspect of it too, right? So people claiming that they've done this amazing art when they haven't done it. But the thing is, as soon as people realize it's AI, even if the person was being honest about what they're doing, it just becomes disappointing to people who are like, oh, well, I don't care about that. And then the other problem they're running into with these AI companies too is that they've never turned a profit with any of them. Well, there you go. Yeah, MIT can handle some stuff right by themselves. But Facebook's got shut down because they because of like I guess there was a rare bee, an endangered bee species on the property where they wanted to build their servers next to the plant. And again, if people feel deceived, so I think one of the things to think about, because a lot of people are nervous about how it's going to affect entertainment markets, because there's some bad news coming out of like the strikes and what's being decided for people working in animation especially. But I think the authenticity of analog media like this is going to be I think more valuable to people, because they're going to say, oh, anybody can prompt an image with Grok on Twitter or whatever, but who can draw with pencil and paper? And I do a lot of digital stuff, of course, but I think there's going to be kind of more interest from people that want to support real artists and the authenticity that provides with the traditional media, as long as they're telling better stories and doing the things that people are really interested in. But it's 10 o'clock, so I got to shut down. But thanks to everybody that came in. Oh yeah? There's a weird server farm downtown in Boston above Macy's. Huh. Does Macy's know about the server farm? That's like that building in New York with no windows. I think it's supposed to be like an NSA data center or something like that. Yeah, but have a good night, everybody. We'll talk to you later, probably in the morning.